thought we could start with a few questions and maybe even open it up to the audience. I'm sure we also have some things they'd like to discuss with you. But maybe the first and probably the easiest question is, like, can you talk about the origin of you working on this film? How long did it take? And then we can go maybe into the research a little bit more.
Okay. All those testimonies were collected by an organization that I'm one of the founders of and a board member called Breaking the Silence, which is an organization that was founded in 2004 of veteran soldiers who decided that there was an urgent need to make the occupation visible to Israelis, first of all and foremost, but also to others, because governments of Israel in the last 54 years have succeeded in making the occupation invisible to us. So, and Breaking the Silence mission is to collect testimonies from their own peers, other soldiers who served in the occupied territories, and to publish it. And a few years, and originally, they marked their moment of timeline as the Second Intifada, the year 2000, which is their own generation. So they collected testimonies from 2000 and on. But a few years ago, we decided, in order to celebrate the jubilee of the occupation, to do a project of collecting testimonies since the year 67, since the very beginning of the occupation. And once this collection was established, me as the filmmaker in the board of directors of the organization started editing the interviews to single stories so that we can, the board as a group, can look at it and decide what to do with it. Because obviously we decided to collect those testimonies on video, but we had no real plan of what to do it. And as I was editing, I realized that there was a larger story to tell than just, Breaking the Silence would publish the testimonies as single testimonies or 2 or 3 under a certain theme, put it on Facebook and on the website, etc., and mostly do collection of testimonies in writing, books and booklets. And I realized that there was a possibility to make a larger scope film out of it. In the beginning, I thought that it will be only testimonies. And it took a while for me to understand that there are very few other addicts like myself to the occupation, and that there was a need to intermediate those testimonies and put them in some kind of historical logic. But one thing that I did in the very beginning, when I started editing the interviews, was I decided that I will stick only to actions, mechanisms, procedures, orders, not to reflections, because in every interview, of course, the witnesses also speak about how they felt, about their experience, about their reflections, about the moment where they understood what they were doing. And I decided that this is a film without reflections, only actions. And in retrospect, this was when the manual was born. I didn't know it at the time, but this was the birth of the manual.
I think the first one is a tiny bit of a reflection. It says something like, "I will never forget." And from there, you can just imagine.
Yes, well, there are a few that obviously, I couldn't cut out their reflections, and a few, like this guy, Sharon Chagoli, who says that all his memories are in the club, that and you see from his face is a reflection. I mean, obviously, I refused to turn the reflection into the center of the testimony. The reflection is there. There are so many of them that you see on their faces. What's behind? What's happening there? Yeah, the idea was to stick to procedures, to mechanisms.
So can you talk a little bit more about the interviews? So how did you select people? How do you meet people? And which one are willing to go with open face? They don't really know how much is going to be cut out when they're, or edited when it's going to be used. So how difficult is it to build a relationship with maybe some people who may not be all sympathetic to the cause you're talking about?
Well, I didn't meet the witnesses before the film was finished, because the testimonies were collected by researchers of Breaking the Silence. They explained, well, every person who testified knew what Breaking the Silence is, and knew how Breaking the Silence publish their reports or their collections. And so, it was made clear in the release that they all signed that Breaking the Silence can do anything with it. I mean, it sounds terrible, but this is how you, when you collect testimonies, you can't afford to have multiple editors to the end product. And I'm sure that people who are in academia or in journalism understands that this is how it works. So, well, some of them discovered that there was a film at a very late moment. There was one person who was not very happy with his presence in the film, but he decided not to do anything about it. He felt very uncomfortable telling what he has done, but decided eventually not to pursue, I don't know, any...
No one pressed charges?
No, definitely not. And he eventually came to the public screening of the film, and I think in retrospect he's happy that it came out. It was, but most people are in the film are. Well, I know so many of them from. Well, I wanted to say other contexts, but it's the same context, from political activism, that none of them had any problem with being in a film. Maybe some of them don't like my character, or don't agree with the thesis that I
You mean the little presentation before the chapter?
Yes, the little Machiavelli of this film. I tried my best. I'm not sure that I qualify, but I did. And I know that there are sometimes people who feel uncomfortable with this presentation because even when you criticize the occupation and the governments for the occupation, it's very difficult to think that there is so much evil behind all those things. I think, me too, in a way, would like to think that we are stuck with it, with the occupation, and we don't know how to solve it. And you know, because every time people ask, Okay, how? I don't know how. I know it has to end. But so I think that this character that is so cynical and doesn't, obviously doesn't reflect on the other side of those actions is disturbing and is supposed to be disturbing.
So how did you organize the chapters? Because you obviously, you knew what you were going to find and you were looking for specific development in the way you were telling the 54 years, well, 55 soon. So can you talk a little bit more about that and how it was? You make it in a very specific way, where it gets worse and worse.
Well, because first of all, this is the Middle East. Every day is worse than the day before, everywhere, not only in Israel, Palestine. This is the Middle East. Ask Syrians, ask Lebanese, they will tell you. Originally, I organized first of all, I worked with an archive that existed, and I limited myself to the archive, the collection of testimonies of breaking the silence. And I started organizing the testimonies under themes. And at a certain moment, I even thought of skipping the chronological timeline and organizing it by themes, because what you see, obviously, is that procedures are repeated. Blowing up houses or entering families' homes at the middle of the night didn't start after the Second Intifada, which is something a lot of Israelis tell themselves. But then I realized that if the film will be organized by themes, I will have very little audience, because it will, for people who don't know the occupation very well, or the Israeli-Palestine history very well, they will be lost in it. And so the organization remained, only was put in chronological order, and obviously there were many more the first assembly of the film was 3.5 hours of only testimonies, without myself, without any news archive, etc. So there was a huge material, bulk of material that I had to separate myself from some. Obviously, filmmakers fall in love with their material, and it's very difficult to put things aside. But the decision not to reflect helped me a lot, and of course the idea that people who were present in the situation that they were describing was very important. That they participated was very important, and you try to make it interesting. I think the occupation is quite interesting.
It's interesting in a depressing way, but it is. So people who are the interviewed, they've seen the film together? Or did you do screenings with everyone that have been interviewed with Breaking the Silence or not? So, people who are in the film, the people who are interviewed through the archive and Breaking Silence, have they seen the film together? Did you do some public screening or private screening with everyone?
At a certain moment when the film was very close to being finished, I sent them all links to watch at home, because there was also a need to see if there is some, feedback that someone is terribly hurt or unpleasant with what he sees. So they all got links. The truth is that the majority didn't watch it.
You mean you checked who clicked on the link?
No, I conducted communications with them and with many of them, and many didn't watch it. Then we organized a closed screening at the Tel Aviv Cinematheque only for witnesses and friends of Breaking the Silence, and many came. And now it's on Facebook. The full film is on Facebook in the region, in the Middle East. So they can all watch it. I maybe some of them haven't until now. I don't have the NSO thing that.
You don't have a spyware.
Well, not officially.
Okay. Well, because we were discussing earlier also distribution in Israel. The film is not shown in a normal cinema circuit, so you can't do a lot of, you have to go a different way. And do you think it's because the films are like so political, as well as distribution for documentary maybe also tricky?
Well, the film is not so political.
No.
Look, none of the cinema foundations, broadcasters, or film festivals in Israel have selected the film. They all rejected it. Now, I can't tell you why, because I haven't been in their deliberations. Again, the NSO thing didn't work. But it was funny, the one director of a documentary film festival in Tel Aviv called me up, and it's very rare that a festival director calls a filmmaker to tell him that his film was not accepted. I believe you agree.
I believe I do not do that usually.
So she called me and said, hi, how are you? We watched your film and we talked about it a lot, but we decided not to select it. But I want to tell you one thing. It's not because of the subject. And she said no more, which meant she called to tell me that my film was shitty. Which was a very strange, really, politely, in terms of politeness, it was a very strange conversation. And I'm so sad that I didn't record it.
That's something I will hope never have to do, to tell someone, I'm not taking your film, not because of the subject, I'm just a terrible filmmaker.
And the other two festivals didn't, well, they sent an email and it was better. I felt better to get it as a dry, distanced kind of message and not an apologetic, obviously untruthful, apologetic way.
An email, like, good efforts, maybe next time.
Yes. Keep on with the good work.
I hope we have time for a few questions. We're going to repeat the question because we're not sharing microphone. So I see someone here? Yes. If you can speak louder, everybody can hear, otherwise we'll repeat.
I was born in 1966, so I realized I'm just only barely a year older than this occupation. You just watch. I really enjoyed your documentary. Two quick questions. Could you address the issue of the psychological effect on Israeli soldiers and like post-traumatic stress syndrome of some of the people that you've interviewed? And second, as a documentarian, what's your notion of feeling about objectivity in terms of being a documentarian?
Okay, look, I'm not an expert on the psychology of the soldiers or the post-trauma of the occupier. I'm not an expert on the post-trauma or the psychology of the occupied either. And there are many films, by the way, and researchers dealing with those questions of how, we tend to say that the occupation leaks into Israel, that procedures that were created in order to control the occupied territories leak to the police or other forces that are maintaining security or whatever they call it in Israel. And I agree. I'm sure that when you talk to people who served, it's obvious that the occupation has left a deep psychological mark on them. But again, I didn't research it. I would not try to give you, to provide serious comments on that. You asked about objectivity?
About keeping your own, say, opinion out in film.
Yes, but how can you not? I mean, not because of the subject of the film. In every film, every documentary, those documentaries that look like they were filmed by flies on the wall, like they used to call it, these are maybe the most untruthful documentaries because they are pretending. And I appreciate the Meisels brothers and Pennebaker this is not criticism. I think it's a wrong perception because hiding the fact that there is a person behind the camera and he makes the decisions. He makes the decision where to place the camera, when to start rolling and when to cut, and then later in the cutting room and how to create the narrative. There isn't such a thing as documentary that really depicts reality. Documentary is something that the film is something that comes out of when the filmmaker thinks that maybe this is how reality should be presented through his eyes. There's always a storyteller. There's always someone who retells the story, the reality, the ways he understands it. So I make, if you'll see my other films, which are, by the way, all free on YouTube, subtitled to many languages, you will see that I make a point out of it. The filmmaker is always there. The dilemmas of the film, of making the film, are in a way the center of most of the films. And it's not just because I love myself and my red nose, but it's because I think it's very important to communicate to the viewers that they're not watching reality. They're watching reality through me, and I can do bad stuff.
There was someone here?
Yes. In your personal opinion, is a two-state solution still viable?
My personal opinion doesn't count. I don't think so, but yeah, and let's say that ideologically, I would support the one-state solution, but I'm also very worried whether this will end in a bigger bloodshed. So I can't tell you this is how we solve it. I know that the occupation has to end, and I know that we need to talk. Two-state solution, I think, is long gone.
I think we have time for one final question before wrapping up. And I saw someone here, I believe, yeah.
Elaborate on your performance in this film. You're always in your films. And in some previous work, also very quiet throughout the film. Especially when you see the archival footage, it feels like it's almost muted. Something about that silence comes from your performance.
Yes, the archives were muted, or let's say they were, originally they were completely muted.
I think some people didn't hear in the back, so it's a question about your performance, that you're always in your film and you're not as angry as you used to be. You're a little bit more muted in this one, and summary.
Yes, and Ben also mentioned that the archives sound as if they're also almost muted. So originally I did mute all the archives, but the last shot, the Good Morning Gaza shot, which obviously without sound doesn't mean anything. Then Arte, who produced the film, the French broadcaster Arte, the commissioning editors saw the film and they said, look, when you watch a film at home and there's no sound, you think the television is broken. which was funny. Maybe this is why Charlie Chaplin put a piano on his films. But anyway, so I understood that there was a need, you negotiate with your commissioning editors, and I added some sounds of, if you remember once when we had celluloid, when you played an empty soundtrack in a projector, it made some sound, but it was like things like that. Now, I'm trying to avoid the question of my performance, as you understand. Look, the truth is that I was much more angry in the past, or physically more angry in the past, or my anger would outburst more easily, and I have children who could be parents already, so maybe I'm more relaxed. There was a moment when until a certain moment, I made films against something. And at a certain moment, once I entered the garden, which is 2012, and Between Fences, which is 2016, I started making films with other people, not against, but with. And I think this was a very important change of tone. Well, in this film, it's true that it's quiet, but I wanted this guy to be, I hope that you understand that inside is vicious. So there was no, obviously I realized after trying to make a film about Ariel Sharon, I realized that monsters don't necessarily look like monsters. So I wanted to be a monster, but I learned something from Sharon, apparently.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap up already, but thank you so much for coming and talking about the film, your performance.
Thank you, Florence. Thank you, New York.